Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today with us from all over the world. Today, I'd love to welcome you to our webinar, Bridging Between CAD and GIS, 6 Ways to Automate Your Data Integration. Today, I'm joined by both Evie and Sarah, so I'll hand it over to Evie to introduce herself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Evie. I work at Safe Software in technical support. I specialize in FME form, and I'm happy here to lead you in this webinar. I'll pass it on to Sarah.
Thanks. So hi, everyone. I'm Sarah, and I am also a technical support specialist at SAFE, also on the FME form side. I'm actually on the same team as Evie, and I'm also really excited to be here to talk about CAD and GIS with you all today.
Fantastic. Thank you both. And then we also have Javita joining us on the back end this morning to help with any questions that might be coming in. And we may have an appearance from Dale at the end, Dale Lutz at the end as well. So definitely, if you have any questions throughout, please get those into the questions panel on the bottom right, and I'll remind of that in a couple moments as well. Just a quick overview of our agenda. So we're going to be going through an overview of the topic today. Then we'll be going into migrating CAD drawings to GIS, challenges there, and then specifically with coordinate systems, labeling, and schema drift, which are common ones. Real world solutions we'll be demonstrating through some demos as well. Then we'll move on to sharing GIS data with CAD users, challenges, styling, and data requests specifically, and also real world solutions and demos on that subject. Then we'll have a conclusion with some resources to help you get started and our Q&A session. If you are new to Livestorm and you have any audio issues or video issues at all, you can click the help button on the bottom left for 4 simple troubleshooting steps. Share your emoji reactions with us during the webinar on the bottom middle there of your screen. We love to see them and see your reactions throughout. We really appreciate those. Great, people are testing it out already. We will have a poll shortly on the bottom right, so keep an eye on that polls tab. As I just mentioned, questions. Any questions throughout, drop them in. We'll keep an eye on that and then have the live Q&A at the end. And keep letting us know where you're tuning in from in the chat. All right, so here is our poll already. I will publish that. You should all see it under the polls tab. We'd love to know today, what do you see as the biggest challenges in CAD to GIS and vice versa data integration? A few options there, and if there are any other challenges that you face as primary ones, please put those in the chat. We'll give everyone a moment there. All right. It looks like the majority of votes have come in now. So I'll get our presenters. You can head on over to the polls tab and click the little eye emoji on the bottom right. And we can take a look at the results there together. It looks like translating geometry and attributes is a big one. Preserving annotations and symbology, not far behind.
Oh yeah, those are the 2 winning ones for sure.
Someone in the chat said all of the above. All right, thanks so much everyone for voting there. We'll definitely aim to address any challenges today and provide some awesome tips and tricks for you along the way. All right, and with that, I will hand things over to Sarah to introduce us to our topic today.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. Just give me 1 second here.
And while Sarah's starting her screen share here, I'll actually get our presenters to turn off their webcams, and that'll help us save on some bandwidth.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Just to continue a little bit with our webinar introduction here, thought we could start with just a broad look at what you can expect today. So this sentence here really summarizes our focus for our webinar today. We'll be exploring how you can use FME to overcome some of the challenges that you might encounter when trying to move from CAD to GIS and vice versa. And so thank you all for chiming in with the poll there. It kind of gives us an idea of what we should be showing. Right, so let's just talk really quickly about CAD versus GIS. Obviously, there are quite a few differences. For one thing, CAD users are focused on more on the drawing side and how things look, rather than, for example, what attribute data are attached to them. So symbologies, levels, layers, dimensions, these are all very visual elements and really important to get right in floor plans and building layouts. This can be compared to GIS users who tend to worry more about the features and information that their data can provide. So attributes, geometry tables, of course, location, these are kind of the important pieces here, since without them you can't really reliably do spatial analysis. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our company, Save Software, so that you can get to know us a little better, especially if this is maybe your first webinar with us. We've been around for almost 30 years now, and in that time we've helped over 200,000 users all over the world solve their data challenges. We also have many global partners and a very, very friendly FME community, which is where you'll find our forums. We always encourage people to check that out if you haven't already. And this is our FME platform. So starting on the left there, FME Form is the authoring environment where you build your workflows. It has a visual drag and drop interface, and you'll be seeing a lot of that today because this is the main part of the platform that we will be showing off in this webinar. On the right side there, we have FME Flow, and I like to think of this as the tool that takes your FME Form workflows to the next level. So you can do automations, schedules, triggers. There are lots of options to play around within there. And this can be deployed on premises or in your private cloud. And last but not least, we have FME Flow hosted. It's the same thing as FME Flow, but the infrastructure is managed by us here at SAFE in an AWS cloud environment. This nice graph here just kind of shows how far we've come since our humble GIS and CAD beginnings. So GIS and CAD are still our bread and butter, and we've expanded so much based on the needs of our customers. We now support over 500 formats, standards, and applications. And speaking of bread and butter, we're going to jump into today's topic now. This is part 1. We'll be talking about migrating CAD drawings to GIS. I will also mention here that all of the workspaces that Evie and I demoed today, they will be available for download when this webinar recording gets posted. So you can feel free to try them out for yourself if you'd like. All right, so I'm going to jump into our first scenario here. This was actually also the first data challenge that SAFE and FME ever tackled, so a bit of history there. And the story here is that we have some forest cover maps that were drawn in MicroStation that we want to use in GIS analysis. The problem was that in MicroStation, these boundaries are represented using lines and points. The points have the attribute data attached to them, but in the GIS, we just wanted the polygons with the attributes. So to do this, we will of course be using FME, in particular our area builder and point on area overlayer transformers, in order to create those areas and then assign them the appropriate attributes. This is the MicroStation specification that we're looking at today. We are looking at levels 9 and 10, with 9 being the lines and 10 being the points, again, where the attribute data comes from. And basically, these are the specs that we will be using to build our areas. And this is what our input data looks like. This is the forest cover map that was drawn in MicroStation. You can see the yellow interior points there. And now I'm going to be showing you how this is done in FME with a little flash demo. So when you open a fresh new workspace, this is what you see. So in the middle here is the canvas where we will be building out our workflow. I'm just going to go and add a MicroStation reader here just by typing on the canvas and then selecting the data that I want to start with. In this case, it's the boundaries and points that we just saw. There they are. I'm going to go hit run on that. And the green magnifying glasses that pop up, those are feature caches. They basically store the data at every step of the translation. It's a really great tool for troubleshooting. And you can easily view the data using our visual preview down here. You've got the graphics and the attribute table right next to each other. Right, so next we're going to add a tester, which is a filtering tool, and I have this one set up already. I'm just going to go and add a summary annotation, which will show us how the parameters were set up. So essentially, we only want features that have an element type of 7 and a graphics group of 0. Next, I'm going to run that tester. And as you can see, 862 features passed, and we'll be using those, and 393 did not pass, and we will not be using those. Next, we are going to add an area builder, which is going to take those forest cover boundaries and fill them in to create areas. I'm going to go run that. And our result will show us that the perimeters have been turned into areas, which is exactly what we wanted. Next, we're going to add a point on area overlayer, and this is going to identify which points are located on which areas, and then join the point attributes to the area. So I'm going to connect our area builder and tester to it, and then we're going to run that as well. And there is our result. We can see that the boundaries have now taken on the attributes of the point layer. And last but not least, we're going to add a shapefile writer here quickly. I know shapefiles are kind of losing popularity, but if you download this workspace to play with, you can feel free to switch it out to anything else. So one of the cool things about FME for sure is that it's easy to edit and swap things out if you need to. So now that that's finished running, we can see our final result. And there it is again. So here's our workspace again. We only needed to use 3 transformers to achieve this. And just to recap the scenario, we took some CAD line work and used a couple of transformers to build areas out of lines. We also made use of the feature caches and visual preview window to keep us on the right track, help make sure our data looks good at every step as we built out this workflow. The key transformers here were the area builder and point on area overlayer. And we also made use of the tester transformer to create a subset of the data that we wanted to work with. We are now left with data that's ready for spatial analysis in the GIS, as well as a workspace that can be tweaked. We can use it over and over again with a new set of forest cover maps. And now I'm going to hand it over to Evie. She's going to be telling you how to change coordinate systems.
Thanks, Sarah. So our scenario 2 is coordinate systems. We'll be going over how to read and set coordinate systems from original CAD files to be able to use in our GIS. Sometimes DWG files don't have coordinate systems, and sometimes they do, and we can rate them. And so we will showcase the coordinate systems available and the result of having them assigned. So the input data here, you can see that there is no coordinate system, there's no background map right now. And so this is what the data looks like. To move on to the demo here, I'm going to drag and drop the file onto the canvas, select the coordinate system in the reader, and load it in. You see here, and then I'm going to run it just to see if the coordinate system has successfully been read in. You can see here that yes, it has been read in successfully. You can see in the visual preview, and I'm going to read it in again without a coordinate system set in the reader, and you'll see the difference here in the visual preview and in the feature information window here. Yeah, there's unknown coordinate system, but I can add a coordinate system setter. I'm typing freely on the canvas and adding it here, and I'm setting it in the coordinate system setter. You can see here all of the coordinate systems available, and yeah, there's lots of coordinate systems available. You can also add your own coordinate system. That's the end of the demo. So this is the solution. It's just set it in the reader or set it in a coordinate system setter after the fact. So if you ever forget and you're just loading it in and press OK too soon, you can always set it later. That's no worries. Yeah, so this recap here, the task was to assign coordinate systems. And the tips for success is that you can set it in the reader. You can use the coordinate system setter to set the coordinate system of your data. You can use the reprojector as well as other coordinate system transformers as well. The reprojector, the difference between the coordinate system setter and the reprojector is that the coordinate system setter sets the coordinate system that already exists, Meanwhile, the reprojector reprojects into a new coordinate system. So you would have to have a coordinate system already set. So like from a local to a projected coordinate system and of the like. You can also write coordinate systems to CAD files. There are some articles here that we can put in the chat. Which AutoCAD format should I use, and getting started with AutoCAD to get you started. So I'll pass it on to Sarah for the next demo.
Okay, thanks. So in this next scenario, we will be moving from labels to attributes with proximity. This is also known as proximity matching. And so here we have some labels that we need to attach to nearby lines, which are streets. So essentially we want to attach street names to streets, and containment is not an option here. So the key transformer for this workspace will be the neighbor finder. This will find the closest geographic match between two sets of spatial data so that we can attach label information to the line closest to it. So here's the CAD label data that we are starting out with. They are even in the right orientation, they just don't have the line data set. So it's not great for spatial analysis the way it is now. And let's look at the workspace that we're going to use to fix that. So this is our roads line data set. You can see there are no attributes attached to it at all. And we're going to join this with the road names CAD file that we just saw. So first we're going to use the text property extractor to extract road names to the attribute table. And there they are. And then next we're going to use that neighbor finder, which will merge them together based on the closest spatial match. So there they are with the appropriate street names. And so now this long road down the middle here, Glover Road, it is one long road, but it's segmented because that's how the lines are in the line data set. And we can just merge them together using this line combiner. So this is going to merge all the lines that have the same street name. And there it is, one long road as it should be. And our last step there was just writing it back out to CAD. So you could see that using simple workspace like this, it's just really easy to attach labels to your data set. You can of course add more to it, but this is a great starting point. And so to recap here, we used a neighbor finder to do proximity matching between a set of labels and a line data set. We then used the line combiner to combine lines with the same road names, and this gave us a more realistic picture of how these roads look in the real world. One idea you can use to take this workspace to the next level, you can maybe add a tester after the line combiner. That could be used for QA and just making sure that all the lines were properly combined. Anything that falls through can be investigated manually. You can even add some more transformers to patch them up. Many things you could do here to kind of expand on this workspace. Right, so we've seen a couple demos now, and if you're new here, you might be getting a little overwhelmed with all the transformer names and functions and parameters that we've been throwing around. The good news is that you don't have to remember them all. We have over 500 transformers and counting, and I don't think any one person in the world can remember how to use them all or even just all of them. So this is where we have a transformer gallery. It's really helpful to help you find the transformer you need, and that is available on safe.com/transformers. And it's also built into the FME form canvas. So as you can see on the far left side there, you can also use the quick add feature by clicking on an empty spot in your canvas and typing. You've probably seen us do that a few times now. And on the bottom left-hand corner of any reader, writer, or transformer, there is a help button, and that will take you straight to the documentation. So we really hope that these tools can save you from feeling lost when building your workspace or trying to figure out what transformer you should use next. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Evie again to show you all how to handle schema drift.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so schema drift, we are going to use regex and AI to go over this next scenario. But what is schema drift? So a change in the source or target data definition is what schema drift is. And this usually is a lot of frustration and causes time loss because it's hard to deal with if you don't have an automatic process to deal with it. But FME can help with this. So we are going to show you a little bit about how to do this with our decode attribute rich layer names in our example. We are going to, this example has been used in the previous webinar. I've changed it slightly to show you an alternative way, but we are going to extract attributes encoded in a CAD layer name to use in GIS. The block is that the comprehensive specification embedded attributes in parts of the layer names, making it very hard to understand or otherwise use the data. So we're going to split these out into parts and make this into an understandable GIS ready data set. So to look at the data, we have here the layer name is 3-character code for the road type, 8 digits for the date of the last update, and 2 characters to represent collection method. So this here is all of the layer names, and we'll go into the demo. So here is the previous workspace. I'm just going to run the reader here, and I will add a new transformer called the string searcher to use regex. So you can see here the data and what it looks like. And I'm just going to type freely on the canvas to add the string searcher, move it a little closer, and connect it up to the reader. If I go in here, I'm going to go to search in the FME feature type and add a regex. I'm going to use the AI assist, the new AI assist method, to put this in plain English. I'm going to extract the 8 consecutive digits here and click on generate. Yes, it's going to use a third party, and here we are. This is what we need, is exactly what we need. I'm going to click apply, close, click OK again, and run it, and let's see if this works. And so it'll go into the first match attribute that I set, and you can see that it has extracted the date. So that's super exciting. I'm going to add another string searcher I already have prepared for you, just over on the side. And this is going to extract the other code so that we can use the rest of this to use the type. Yeah, and we're going to add a attribute value mapper here to the canvas and connect it up to the string searcher and set the second match as our input value and import the values from an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to select it here. And I'm going to make sure that I'm importing from attribute values, not names, and select the code and what I'm going to be assigning it to and import. And you can see here that the input and output values are assigned. And if I run that, now all of the extracted attributes that from the string searcher are now assigned. So they're looked up and they're there. So now I can connect it to the writer, and this writes to a shapefile disconnected from the previous example, and I can assign the user attributes in the writer here, the type, and assign the attribute here. I want it to be looked up. And press OK. And that's it. So then if I run it, then that's it. That now it's usable in our data. They're now extracted, and it's used. We can use it in our GIS. So that's the end of the demo. So this is the solution here. You can see that I've added the string searcher and attribute value mapper, and this is the alternative to the attribute splitter and database joiner that has a similar outcome. So there's several ways to achieve the same thing in FME, and this is just one way. Yeah. So to recap, the task was to extract attributes encoded in a CAD layer names to use in GIS. We used the attribute splitter in the previous webinar, and now we're using the string searcher to extract values using regex and AI, and to decode the parts using a attribute value mapper. So this is the benefit of using these transformers to route an attribute-rich GIS dataset. So now for the next solution, our scenario here is the digital plan submission. This is an example from the city of Henderson. The city of Henderson wanted to improve their digital plan submission process for new construction projects by simplifying and automating CAD to GIS conversion. Before, all the data entry and processing was done manually, but using FME, they created one automated workflow, which helped reduce data integration time by 75% without impacting the quality of the data. This is still in use today. Land developers use the web portal to submit their drawings and immediately receive an email confirmation or error report through HTML streaming. So the goals and results for this is that for this scenario are to create a digital plan submission, to automatically check and upload CAD drawings to ArcGIS Online. The block is that it takes time and manual effort to process these plans, and now we have automated this process with FME to validate CAD submissions before and automatically uploading them to ArcGIS Online. The result is that the submissions meet the requirements and are uploaded to ArcGIS Online, and the ones that don't are sent back for fixing to the user themselves. So to recap, the task was to create a digital plan submission that checks the validity and either passes the file to upload to ArcGIS Online or fails and returns a streamed report of HTML of why it failed. This provides the submitter with information to fix the file immediately and submit again with no communication wait time, keeping the responsibility back on the submitter to provide valid submissions. At a high level, working from CAD to GIS involves a lot of capturing human readable information and cleaning up topology so the data set can be used for analysis in the future. Some of the transformers we've noted here from the workspace you saw really highlight that process, including the snapper, intersector, area builder, point on area overlayer, and neighbor finder. So I'll pass it on to Sarah for the next part of the webinar.
All right, thanks. So we have arrived to our second and final section. We're just going to shift our focus a little bit to talk about how we can share GIS data with CAD users. So CAD data, as we mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, is very, very visual. So it's just really easy to see what you're doing and looking at when you use things like block instances or symbology to represent objects or to differentiate between areas and textures. So when you're moving from GIS to CAD, it is a challenge to keep those visuals looking nice and easy to interpret while also keeping the intelligence of GIS data. So this might be things like coordinate systems. CAD data also needs to meet certain standards a lot of the time. So like how we saw in the previous CAD validation demo, there are restraints and certain things that need to be structured or stylized properly, and that's why it's important to take care when you're moving from GIS to CAD. And speaking of the importance of styling, our sixth scenario is going to cover that. So in this scenario, we are taking point, line, and polygon data that was meant for GIS, and we are outputting it to CAD. Our challenge here is with the styling specifications that is expected of the CAD file, but luckily we have some styler transformers that will help us with this. So let's take a look at what we're working with. This is the GIS data that we need to transform. We've got the purple park polygons, bike paths, which are represented by the red lines, and dog park set are represented by the pink points. And we're going to take a look at our workspace. This is our input data again on the side. We'll be classifying all these components differently using several DWG stylers. This one's being used to style areas. You can set the color up there as well as a fill pattern. For parks, we're using grass, but there are lots of other options to choose from. We also have a template file added here. This is an optional parameter, but it can be used to define layers, colors, block definitions, and here we're going to be using it for line weights. So there are different options for lines or text styling as well as blocks. So it's pretty simple to apply styling onto your DWG. There is also a DGN styler, which is the MicroStation version of this, and I'll come back to that in a second. And our workspace is run. I'm going to show you the output in AutoCAD. Just looks a little nicer over there. And yes, you can see all the symbology has been applied, and you can use this in AutoCAD now. Here's our workspace again. This workspace actually came from our FME hub, and we're going to stick the link to that in the chat. And if you don't already know about it, I'll do a quick plug here. The hub is a great place to find custom transformers, templates such as this one, and just lots more fun stuff. So another great resource to check out. But back to our demo for now. So we started with features from a file geodatabase, and we used 5 DWG stylers to stylize the types of features differently so that we end up with symbology that is much simpler to understand in CAD, as you can see here. All right, so to recap this demo, we took some GIS data and some DWG stylers to apply symbology. We made use of a CAD template to provide some of the layer definitions, and we did do some minor filtering and labeling just to make our styled output a bit more clear and just more relevant to what we wanted to show. And lastly, as I mentioned, there is also a DGN style if you're working with MicroStation. It works pretty similar to the DWG styler. It kind of does the same thing, but just a little differently. And we have a bonus 7th use case to cap this all off. And this comes to us from the city of Burnaby in British Columbia, Canada. They had a call before you dig system so that land developers can receive information about what's underneath the ground before they dig into it and mess it up. And it's a really great idea. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of the digging. However, the problem they ran into might be considered a good problem, but it was still a big problem nonetheless. The city grew very, very quickly, and as a result, the volume of requests increased by 6,000% over just 2 decades. So you can imagine it was impossible to manually keep up with it all. And this is where they brought in FME to automate that process of procuring and packaging the information. And this cut the wait time from 3 days to a very impressive 3 minutes, which is a huge improvement. The staff there that were previously overwhelmed and probably really stressed by this can now shift their attention to more productive tasks, and by using FME, they eliminated the risk of manual errors. And so with that happy ending, we have arrived at the end of the demo and scenario portion of our webinar, and I'm going to hand it back to Evie and Elizabeth to wrap us up.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for joining us on our journey through CAD and GIS integration. We hope today's webinar showed you several ways you can achieve harmony between CAD and GIS by automating its integration. We started the first half of our scenarios of looking at migrating CAD drawings to GIS and some real-world challenges by taking sometimes messy CAD drawings and bringing it into a geospatial environment for possible analysis down the road. In our examples, we showed how to QA or clean up geometry, how to bring text as attributes on corresponding geometry, how to represent CAD elements in GIS to bring all the information across. Using FME to facilitate this integration, we are then able to get the full potential out of our CAD data into an environment that facilitates analysis, enabling sharing of the latest and most up-to-date data among GIS users, decision makers, and planners. In the second half, we looked at sharing GIS data with CAD users, and some of the challenges there were about maintaining georeferencing and representing GIS intelligence through the use of symbology. We looked at how municipalities today use self-serve data requests to get GIS data to those who need it without any wait time and in the format they need it in. So going both ways, FME really helps achieve a harmony between CAD and GIS by automating its integration. So now for some resources. We have tutorials in the FME community. We can put this in the chat. The GIS to CAD convert parcel polygons, lines, and geobases to DGN, how to convert DGN to shapefile, CAD levels to GIS attributes, and getting started with AutoCAD and using the geometry parameter in FME Flow. So there's also our ebook, our FME Academy as well, links there, and our knowledge base and more webinars as well on our website. So check those out. So I'll pass it on to Elizabeth for our next steps.
Perfect. Thanks, Evie. I just dropped those links from the resources slide in the chat there, and I'll take over screen sharing. All right, so some next steps to help you get started. If you are newer to FME or you have any questions related to data, we'd love to chat with anything on anything with you, info@safe.com. If you are new to FME, we encourage you to also check out the FME Accelerator course. It's a 90-minute workshop free of charge, and it'll help you unlock the power of your data. If you are a member of the community, we do have a community badge code for you to redeem today. So I will drop that in the chat here as well. If you aren't yet a part of the FME community, please do check it out. It's a great place to network with other users. It has a lot of great resources, and also you can connect with FME experts there. And with that, we do have about, over 20 minutes remaining for some Q&A, which is awesome because we did have a ton of great questions come in. So I'll invite our presenters and Javita to come back on with our webcams here, and we can start to take a look through the question panel. All right, and just a quick reminder to folks as well, if you do have any new questions, please drop those in the questions tab, just so we can ensure we get a chance to reply to them all directly there. All right, and I think what I'm going to do is actually sort at the very top left, and I'll encourage our presenters as well by upvotes, and then that way we can ensure we get to the most relevant questions here to the most folks this morning. Are there any questions in particular we might want to get started with? Throw the question out there to Javita, Sarah, Evie. I know we did get quite a few, but.
Yeah, we got a lot of questions, so thank you everyone for submitting those throughout the webinar.
Yeah, so many.
There's so many, yeah. I see one here, the City of Henderson example. If there are any other cities that have done anything like this or published any material about it. So yeah, the self-serve data portal is definitely one that's really common amongst our local government customers, and we do have a lot of those. We might have some more tutorials on those. I might have to go digging a bit for those, but since it is a common use case, I'm sure there's plenty of help, whether from our technical forums or in the form of an actual published tutorial for that. So,
if that one was to do with the submission plan, I believe there used to be a trail or some training in our Learning Academy, so that might be a place to check out as well. Yeah,
I found a tutorial just now for how to build a digital plan submission. So if you just kind of search it up on our community forums, then there's lots of resources available there.
Excellent. Yeah, and Sarah, if you have a link, feel free to drop it in the chat. We can always.
Sure, yeah.
Excellent.
Noticed a lot of questions, really great questions about coordinate systems and reprojection. One that I recall was to do with the writer. If you set the coordinate system on the writer, yes, it will reproject on the writer processing step. Just note that it needs to have an input coordinate system for it to reproject to another valid coordinate system. There are also quite a few questions. I don't know if Evie or Sarah wants to address them about what to do if you don't have a coordinate system on your DWG input data. Is there any suggestions you might have?
Yeah, I would, if there's a local coordinate system, like already, like not set, but like a grid, you can set that coordinate system in FME with the coordinate system setter. And you can set coordinate systems with like the XY. And yeah, so that would be the first step, I think. And then you can reproject that later with the reprojector to a projection.
Amazing point with the local coordinate system reprojector, or local coordinate system setter, sorry. That one's a really cool transformer that, like Evie says, you can do the calculations, do the offsets, and then set the coordinate system that way. There's actually a really good example of this in another webinar to do with, I think it was one that Dave was on. I'll find the link and I'll drop it in the chat, but there's a video presentation that's more to do with 3D, but the same kind of same concept still applies. And we also have an example of using this transformer in the community. I'll drop both links in the chat.
Excellent. I have that Dave Coordinate Systems webinar link. I can drop that in.
Perfect. Yeah.
Is it okay for the old timer to jump in?
Yeah.
Hello, Dale.
Hi. Just on the coordinate system problem, I wanted to mention, I don't know if it's in ArcGIS Pro or not, but inside of old Arc Map, there used to be a thing where you could bring a CAD file in and then you could kind of fit it into place by overlaying it on a background map. And if you did that, then you could save from ArcGIS, I think a .wld file and maybe a .prj, and FME will pick those up. So we work well with Esri stuff, and so that's one way to interactively try to find the right coordinate system, but it can be a problem for sure.
I got you, Dale. I've dropped a link from Esri on how to kind of fit it into a display in Arc Pro.
I still remember, I'll do story time with Dale here while we figure out the next question. Early in FME's history, we had someone that only ever used MapInfo, and MapInfo files always had a coordinate system. Call in, and I was doing support at that time, and they said FME isn't working because they're reading a CAD file and doesn't have a coordinate system. And I took a few times back and forth for me to realize that they just expected that obviously the CAD file should have a coordinate system and we are failing to read it. And I said to them, no, especially in 1998, lots of CAD files didn't have a coordinate system. And the person said, oh, this is going to be a real problem. And yes, they were right.
All right.
I see a question here on the AI assist function and whether that's available in 23.0, and the answer is that it is not. I think it was implemented in .1, so you will need to update to use that. But there's a mega thread somewhere there, so if you have any issues, definitely reach out to us because it's still kind of a new technology and we want to make sure that it works for everyone. Yeah, we do have a couple AI tools though, so feel free to play around with those and kind of see what cool things you can do with that.
All right. And next
There's so many questions.
Yeah, it is a lot to sort, so bear with us, folks.
I'll just chime in about object data. We do have, I think it's a Map 3D, someone that's got FME handy on Windows can tell me, but there's a Map 3D writer in FME that does do object data. And we actually have resources I could find, when I'm not talking here, I'll try to dig it up. Long ago, and I mean long ago, we did a webinar on how you can get basically every possible way of using object data to be done with FME. It's very, very powerful. But the key is you got to be on Windows and you got to use I think it's the Map 3D writer. Who's Evie or Sarah? Is there one? Object data, something? Anyone? Bueller?
Yes, there is a object data reader and writer.
Yes.
Yes.
That's the one you got to use. And that is layered on top of AutoCAD's real DWG libraries. And we have the ability to read and write them properly.
Yeah. I remember my first time using it, and Dave's explanation was the best. He was saying to write object data, it's basically just writing user attributes. And that really clicked for me because I was thinking like, oh, how do I write to this table? They're user attributes, if that helps.
Awesome. I'll bring up this question on the screen here.
I was just looking at that one. So we do have a couple of tutorials on converting CAD data sets to IMDF. I think it's a 3-parter, or there's at least 3 parts on that. Maybe one of the other experts on the panel here can add to this, but yeah, I do think FME would be a great tool to clean it up before. And again, since CAD is such a big part of what we do, there are plenty of resources available for that. So
what I'd chime in to say is that if the FME approach is not particularly interactive. In other words, you're not going to drag things around and slide them and click and adjust. You're going to set up some rules that are going to be run over and over again on thousands of files. So it kind of depends. If the cleanup is just on one file and it needs you to be more interactive, then you should use an interactive plugin like you'd have inside of ArcGIS. Otherwise, if it's a set of things that were shown, for example, in this webinar that you're going to run over and over again, then you're probably better to automate it. So you just have to figure out, it kind of depends on the situation and what type of cleanup you want to do is.
Yeah, I'd add it depends on the type of cleanup you want to do. If you're wanting to get this data into Arc and Doors, that's a certain set of criteria that you're trying to fill. Or perhaps maybe you just want connectivity, in which case setting that up in FME and creating that clean topology might be easier. So it depends on what you want to do and the set of criteria that you want to fulfill in terms of cleaning up your data.
Which AI engine is FME using? Right now, we tap into the OpenAI's services that are available on Microsoft Azure. So in that way, we're in our own little walled garden. When people send information through, it's not being shared outside of our little happy world. And so that's what it is. But we have architected our back end so that if other options that are better in the future that also meet our security and privacy needs become available, we can change our mind and none of you will be impacted other than maybe it works a bit better. So that's how we've done it.
There's so many great questions. It's hard to choose from.
The cells, Santiago is asking about MicroStation V8 cells. They should be able to be read just fine. It's unclear from the question exactly what the problem is, but again, if the data coming from V8 should be there. We should have the cell name and the rotations and scales, and all of that would be available in the feature information window. You should be able to see the properties you want. The question, like without knowing more details, I would worry about coordinate system troubles in this scenario as a possible thing to check into. Otherwise, either write to the community or into support if you think it's a bug. If it's a how-to, check out our community for this type of a problem. And if you can share the data, you might not be able to, but if you can, that would also be helpful, I suspect. But bottom line is it should work. We put a lot of work into reading cells.
And if you're reading into file geodatabase and you want to keep it scaled, so I'm imagining you want that symbology coming out as, well, geometry in your file geodatabase, assuming, unless you want it as a point. Either way, you should be able to grab that information from the attributes. It will take a little bit of combing through the actual reader documentation to get the right attribute names, but you can get the information about the rotation and scale. Or if you want it as geometry itself in geodatabase, then you can read it in exploded, or what is it called in expanded in MicroStation. Different terminology.
The neighbor finder is a favorite of mine, and someone asks, how does it find the correct line when there's more than one? The answer is we go for the closest one. And there's advanced options in there where you can create what we in FME call a list. So if you choose that and there were several close lines, we will tag the attributes and IDs of all the close lines onto the object in question, and then we will give you the option later on. You could pick through that list, and if you had some other criteria to pick the line you like better, in other words, the longest one or one with maybe a bigger thickness or so on, you can do that. So that's a little more advanced FME. You'd use the neighbor finder, turn on the list option, tell it you want the 5 closest. I think it'll sort them by the distance as well, but then I know customers that then pick through that list using the other list operations, and you could explode that list, pick out just one that you like you could explode and then sort by the ID of the object, and then take a sampler to take the first one, sorting by the criteria you want, like length of line, sampler to pick the first one, that kind of idea. Anyway, list manipulation to deal with it, but lots of options there.
Okay, dare I say it, we've made it through the majority. Still some questions to pick from here, though.
Someone asked about a quick overview of FME Workbench. I think the best place to go for that, if you're brand new, would be to duck into the FME Accelerator course. That's a very short, and that's going to do a better job than we can do right now to give you a quick intro. So yeah, I know that resource was flagged, but that's what my suggestion would be.
That's an excellent resource. Yeah.
Awesome. The link for that's in the chat now as well.
Oh, combining attributes to get CAD labels. There's many ways in FME to do that. I think if you, and I would look to the people that actually use FME to confirm this, but I think is in the DWG styler, is there a thing to make an annotation or a label point? Anyway, if there is, there's an option in there for wherever the actual text is going to be, you can hit a ... and say bring up a text editor, and then from there you can drag in and concatenate and create a long string out of many attributes. But in general, you'd set an attribute in FME that is the result of a concatenation or a text editor, what we call it, where you join them together. So that's actually pretty straightforward.
Yes, there's lots of string manipulation transformers available to do concatenation and other combination and stuff. Yeah.
So someone asked about taking labels from GIS and putting them into CAD so that they stay put where they belong. That seems pretty harsh. They won't get up and move on you. But in general, again, you can use and I'm going to just maybe fire it at myself, but the DWG styler, I think, has an option in it for placing annotations. It's tricky because it's hard to get the exact fonts to match and this sort of thing. But with some fiddling, you can get pretty darn close. There's also, I don't really know if I recommend this, but there is a text stroker transformer that will take labels and turn them into like lines, and then they'll be put out into CAD, and then the fact that they were once a label is now lost until some form of artificial intelligence comes along that could put them back together again. So I probably wouldn't recommend doing that, but that would certainly thwart somebody that wanted to move things on you if you just bake them in as stroked out lines. But yeah.
Somebody was asking if they can get the template for the digital plan submission or self-serve portal workbench. So those came from customers, so we don't have their workspaces on us, but we do have a lot of tutorials on the FME community that will guide you how to make your own. So I'll drop links to that in the chat.
A question from my past here from William about construction lines. I believe that these are floating around. FME does interpret, yes, they are floating around and they're interpreted as any other line. But if you use that, either you read the documentation, or I would prefer to just use the feature information window and look at the various properties. One of them is going to be the clue about the fact that it's a construction line. Do you remember those terms, Jovita?
I feel like I've seen alignment somewhere in the feature information window, but I'm not 100% sure on this one.
I remember, like, from the earliest, in fact, I think those examples that were shown from MicroStation at the very beginning of the webinar, there were construction lines in those that we would use the tester to get rid of in some of the CAD-to-GIS things. I just don't remember the property, but if you look at the feature information window and you got one that is and one that isn't, you will see that one of the properties in there will be different, and that'll be what you'll want to filter on.
I'm going to take this moment to plug on the new FME information window. So use the latest and greatest. It's a lot easier to comb through than it used to be, especially for CAD.
Dimensions. Jovita or Sarah, Evie, have any of you worked with dimensions either in ArcGIS or in the CAD formats?
Yes, I've worked with dimensions a little bit. Convert GIS dimension features into DGN.
I'm not worthy to be on the call.
The short answer is yes. I can't think of many more details right now, except for just making sure that they feed into the correct attributes into DGN. But I've worked a little bit with CAD, like DWG dimensions into MicroStation. So I can say it does work. Mm-hmm. It's just a little fiddly.
Yeah, and I believe we also support them to some degree from ArcGIS. I don't remember how they're done or how the concept is done any longer, but bottom line is I know a lot of smart people have worked hard on this in the last 15 years, and it should be able to be done, and Jovita is living proof that it's possible. Jovita, do we write out, or any of you, do we write out the coordinate system to DGN now? I know that there was just work recently in that area. At least we for sure read it out of DGN. The question I don't know is if we write it.
I feel like we just added support. Let me confirm.
Yes, we need to get Aiden on the call. I'm pretty sure he's the guy who did it. Can we call a friend?
Only if we have special sound effects.
Yeah, this actually is a good time to mention if we aren't able to get to your question or if we need to follow up, we'll be sure to do that after the webinar as well.
I would just, while Jovita is looking, it is the case that literally in 1995, we started our work reading DGN files. And I know that the team, even now, is still making changes and enhancing the work we've done. So we've never really stopped our quest to be the ultimate extractor of value from CAD files, as well as going the other direction. And so some of these corners are things that are lesser trodden, like dimensions and exactly the nuances of projections in there, but progress is always being made. And actually, if you have issues in things we don't do, please let us know. If you can share details and example files, we love to make it better. I think that I'll still be talking about DGN files when I'm in my 90s from the old folks home. Elizabeth will dial me into the webinar at the end just to dust me off.
I can see it, sure.
Got an answer for the coordinate systems for DGN. Supported, it's recently added for 2023.1.
See, breaking news. The sun never sets on the work of CAD writing and reading in FME.
Great. I'll give our team just a chance to scan through questions, and we have time to fit in one or two more before we wrap up. I know we are at the hour here. And like I mentioned earlier, if we don't get to your question, we will be sure to follow up by email as well. So no worries there.
I think I want to just touch on Alex's question about BIM 360. If we aren't picking up something from that, please let us know. That sounds like a good thing to write into us about. We like to be very, very thorough with that, and we would do the right thing there. And once again, it looks like Aiden's going to have things to do in the future because it must be that we're missing something there. So thanks for pointing that out. But we do support BIM 360 or BIM docs. The hardest thing about supporting it is that names keep changing, but we're all over it.
Excellent. Anyone on the panel have any final thoughts or questions we might want to address before we wrap up here? Okay, I will note that we'll keep the webinar running for a couple minutes longer in case you do have any questions towards the end. We'll keep an eye on those and follow up on any via email that we don't get to. Huge thank you to our presenters here today, Evie and Sarah. Really appreciate all your time on this webinar content. I know our audience does as well. And Jovita and Dale for joining us on Q&A. Thank you very much. And of course, big thank you to our audience as well for joining us here today. Recap of next steps, if you are newer to FME, have them on the left side there. And then if you do have a moment, please do fill out our webinar survey. It helps us keep improving our program. It's just a few multiple choice questions, and I'll drop that link in the chat now as well. Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining again. Hope you all have a great rest of your days. Bye for now.